Hi, it's Alison from the Law School Toolbox. Today, I'm excited to have ADHD and executive function coach Emily Haan here with me to talk about some techniques attorneys can use in the workplace if they've got ADHD. So, welcome, Emily.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for coming back. We'll link to your other episodes. Well, to start us off, can you just give our listeners a little bit of information about your background and your work so they have some context here?
Sure. So I started off as a lawyer. I practiced for about uh, 15 years,
Oh, wow.
roughly 15 years. I was practicing as an attorney as well as working at a law school, which was my most recent sort of traditional job before starting my coaching business. And in that job, working at a law school, I was working with a lot of students on how to manage a law school schedule uh, while they were struggling with certain executive function challenges, or just it was their first time having to manage that intense of a schedule. So I pivoted from working at a law school to starting my own business coaching folks with ADHD and or executive function challenges. And I don't just work with law students or attorneys. I also work with other adults and older teenagers on helping to figure out how to fit everything into their lives and meet deadlines and just organize everything that has to happen in a week.
Nice. Well, all that is super important, particularly these days. And if people want to reach out or learn more about you, how can they do that?
Yes, my website is emilyhaan.com. EMILYHAAN.com, and it has some more information about me and about what coaching is, and how you can schedule intake.
Awesome. Well, to kick us off here, can you just explain what ADHD sometimes looks like in adults, particularly in these demanding professional environments like law?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of stereotypes about what ADHD is and isn't, and a lot of people in my generation have grown up with sort of the stereotypical view as someone who's distracted and can't focus and maybe
Right.
has
Like,
trouble in
meh.
school. Right, exactly. Um, but we know that actually ADHD can present in a lot of different ways, and people develop a lot of coping strategies to mask it. And so even lawyers and law students who have been incredibly successful in school and in their careers may still be struggling with ADHD or executive function challenges that look a lot like ADHD. And it can look a lot like hyper focus on one thing. And sometimes that can be really positive, right? You're working on something and you are just grinding until it is finished and nothing else matters. But it can also look like difficulty switching between tasks, um, procrastination. So maybe you get things done on time, but you're frequently pulling all nighters, or they're getting done at the very last minute, which actually gives you a really big dopamine surge. Maybe you're spending a lot of time trying to come up with complicated systems to organize your life and your work, but you're not necessarily doing the substantive work. You're just focusing on color coding a planner. That's really common. And then sometimes just a failure at multitasking, which is unfortunately expected of a lot of professionals these days. It can also look like creativity, right? Like people with ADHD often are the most creative. They're coming up, and it's why they make such good lawyers, because they're coming up with creative arguments and solutions. They're good writers. So that's sort of an overview of what it can look like.
Yeah, I'm laughing because so much of that describes me. And if you asked me when I was working in a law firm, if I had ADHD, I'd be like, no, of course not. That's like the hyper guy, like, running around. But I recently talked to a psychologist who did an assessment. And she's like, oh, yeah, you definitely have inattentive ADHD. You just have a lot of scaffolding, which has
Yeah.
allowed you to do this. And I was like, that is just fascinating. But now,
Yeah.
the more I hear, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not normal. Um, yeah, so
Absolutely.
yeah, exactly.
That's really common. I feel like with a lot of folks I work with, they're just discovering this or always suspected it. And it was ignored, especially like our generation, girls were not frequently
Yeah,
diagnosed with ADHD. So,
never. It was just not a
yeah,
thing that anyone even,
yeah,
thought about.
right.
So yeah, it's been kind of interesting. And what are kind of some challenges, that specifically young lawyers can face here, whether, they have a diagnosable ADHD or just some executive functioning issues. Like, how does the law firm and like legal environment kind of challenge this?
Yeah. I think a big component of it is the pace. I think that's a huge challenge. Even in law school, you can sort of work on one thing at a time, and there's an overview of how the year is going to go. The legal profession, especially if you're working at a firm and especially for litigators, really in any capacity, the pace is really unpredictable. It can be really fast. You're frequently expected to move between multiple tasks at a time. So maybe you're working on drafting a motion, but then a partner calls you and you have to talk to them about something totally different. And then you have to get back to drafting the motion. That's really challenging for a lot of people to switch between tasks so quickly. Also, the hours may not align with your personally most productive hours, right? So again, in law school, there is a class schedule, but you can sort of, and in college too, right? You can sort of do your reading. Maybe you're doing it late at night or early in the morning because that's when you're most productive. When you're in the workplace, you're really subject to whatever the schedule is. Maybe you have to be in court first thing in the morning and your brain does not turn on first thing in the morning, right?
That's
Yeah,
me.
exactly. Right. And like you'd rather go to court at 10 p.m., but that's just not an option. So, and then also billing hours and keeping track of time is a huge, huge challenge because it's just one more sort of administrative task that you have to stay on top of. And that can be really challenging as well. And that's not just for firms, right? A lot of lawyers have to bill hours for a variety of different clients.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually literally one of the reasons I quit. It was I cannot, I was like, I can't do this. I can't like keep track of my day in 6-minute increments. Cause there's somebody,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about like the time blindness that sometimes plays into some of this.
Yeah. A lot of folks with ADHD have, and when I say ADHD, I also mean people who just have a lot of symptoms of ADHD and maybe
Right.
haven't been diagnosed or maybe won't ever be diagnosed. Time blindness is really common. And so that's just this sort of inability. There are people, maybe neurotypical people, who roughly could tell when an hour has passed, right? You're sitting down, you're working. I think it's been about an hour and it's probably pretty close to being accurate. A lot of folks with ADHD just don't have that at all, the ability to sort of feel what the passage of time looks like, which makes things like billing hours, keeping track of time, or knowing, oh, I should be spending about 2 hours on this project and then I should move on to the next. That's where hyperfocus comes into play, right? Maybe you're spending 6 straight hours doing something and you haven't even realized that 6 hours
Right. Like,
has passed.
yeah, the
Right.
whole day's done. And you're like, oh, wait,
And
I
you're,
thought I was
oh,
going to be
wait.
finished with that before
Right.
lunch. And then now it's like
Exactly.
dinner time.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely some challenges. How about things like document review and like attention to detail? Does that cause
Yeah.
problems?
I mean, one of the other things is that as a young lawyer, a lot of the tasks that you're doing are just not that interesting, right? Like you might be reviewing a huge set of documents that are really boring, and that's a struggle for anyone, but it's especially a struggle for folks with ADHD because your brain like needs all this dopamine to just push you forward and to keep doing the task. And if it's boring, it just becomes so much harder. So that can be really hard. Things like document review or any sort of like very rote task that you're just doing over and over again. And it's not exciting. It doesn't feel sort of personally fulfilling to you. What was the other? You asked me, you said document review and
Attention to detail.
attention to detail. I mean, same thing. There's often just like there's a rush to get something done, or if you're feeling bored, you're just not paying, you're not paying attention to the details because you're just sort of going through the motion, and that can be really challenging.
Yeah, I remember once when I was early on in my law firm career, they just assigned everybody in my year to do this like massive document review project. And after about an hour, I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, I cannot do this. And so I went to the partner that I worked for on a different case and was like, look, here's the situation. Like, they've assigned everyone. I think I have like a higher skill set that you could be using on a different case. And, actually she agreed with me, but I was just like, I literally cannot do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, I see that a lot, and it, sometimes you just have to, right? Sometimes you
Right,
don't have the option
exactly.
of working on something else. And so trying to figure out like, what can I do to make this bearable?
Yeah, I mean, the guy who assigned it was not happy, but I was like, "Hey, you know what? Like, I am not the person to do this."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, obviously, if she told me to do it, I would have had to do it. But
Right.
if you can get your way out of it, go for
Yeah.
it.
Do that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can convince somebody you have better skills elsewhere.
Yeah.
Um, what about email management? Because I know this is a thing, particularly like kind of the younger generation tends to
Yeah.
struggle with in general.
Yeah. Um, Email management is something I talk to a lot of my clients about. If the volume of email, even though a younger generation is not used to the volume of email, maybe in their other lives, other parts of their lives, like in the legal world, it's an email heavy profession. We still are using email for pretty much everything, and there's an expectation that you're responding. It's very easy to let it pile up. And then what happens is it becomes almost insurmountable, right? A lot of folks with ADHD, and we'll talk about this, I think, a little later about some coping strategies. But when you have a big project, right, then the task is I have 10,000 emails in my inbox. I need to somehow clear them out. The task is so broad, clearing them out, and then your brain is not just automatically able to go to, okay, what is step one? What is step two? You just see this big insurmountable task. And you're like, yep, shut my laptop. I'm not even gonna look at it. And then it just gets worse and worse. And that happens with email a lot. Just there's that this problem that seems to have no end and you don't know where to start.
Yeah, I think I have like hundreds of thousands of unread emails on my phone at any moment, which someone who used to work for me, she was completely the opposite, like incredibly organized. It would stress her out if I sent her a
Yeah.
screenshot and she saw the number. And I was like, I don't know. I just think of it as like a river or sea at this point. They just kind of flow. I
Yeah.
dip in, you know. So I don't know, maybe that's a coping mechanism. And I do want to move on to that. But before we do, I do want to ask one last thing about kind of what kind of interpersonal or like relationship challenges or things about being in court or meetings might people encounter?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks with ADHD struggle from a lot of self-esteem issues. We haven't, as a society, been really great historically at building up tools and presenting the positive side to ADHD. And so a lot of people in, who are maybe law students now or young professionals or in our generation have sort of developed a lot of shame around needing different resources or needing accommodations or feel ashamed of sort of this inability to do things like everyone else does. I really like to think of ADHD as just it's not atypical. It's just another way that people's brains work. There are so many people whose brains work differently, but that can be really challenging for someone to see when they're living it, and so that can create a lot of self-doubt, fear of asking for what they need, and that sometimes makes the situation worse, right? Because you might have been able to get an extension on something if you had asked when you
Right.
needed it rather than waiting until the last minute, and then it just creates this cascading effect.
Yeah, the whole procrastination, I'm gonna sit down and get it done, and then realizing like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not necessarily gonna get this done." No one wants to hear that, like, at the 11th hour. It's
Right.
just not a
Exactly.
good not a good strategy.
Exactly.
Um, alright, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some coping strategies because I don't
Yeah.
want it to be all gloom and doom here. Um, what are some effective time management strategies and other type of strategies that you might recommend for attorneys, working in this environment?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing I recommend to everyone is that you invest in a physical timer. They can, I should have brought it with me, but often they are just a little timer and they have a sort of a wheel that's one color and then the color fades as the timer goes around. You can get them anywhere. They're really inexpensive. I think it's really helpful to use a timer when you're working, both for billing purposes if you're having to bill work, but also so you are actually seeing how much time you're spending on things because the time issue goes both ways. There's both the sort of tendency to spend too long on something, but then there's also the tendency to worry that something is going to take too long and not want to start it when maybe it would have only taken half an hour. So if you can start making time real and looking at how much time things are taking you, it's going to help you sort of develop mechanism in your brain to be like, oh, it's this kind of project. I know that this usually only takes me about an hour, or it's this kind of project. I know that that's going to take me 4 hours. And so that helps you block your time. Um, I also really like sort of this idea of like racing yourself, right? If you have to do a document review, right, you can challenge yourself. How many documents can I review in an hour? Sort of setting these goals, using the timer, making it a little exciting. It sounds silly, but making it exciting for your brain. Like, ooh, can I do 100 documents in this amount of time? That can be really helpful. Um,
That's yeah, very interesting. Almost like gamification of the
yeah,
task.
gamification works super well. Um, I think also doing all the work of figuring out. So I recommend to everyone, and this is sort of just a general coping strategy, that you set aside time in your week, every week, to sort of plot your week out, right? So it may change, right? Things come up, and the legal profession is unpredictable, but to just have a general sense, this is when I'm going to work on this project. This is when I'm going to write this. This is when I'm going to exercise. This is when I'm going to sleep. So that when you actually go to sit down to do the work, you're not, the first step is doing the work. The first step is not, what work am I going to do right now? Because that process takes time, it takes energy. And then by the time you've done that and then you go to do the work, you don't want to do the work, right? You've spent all your time planning. So planning in advance so you can just open whatever you have to do and do it right away. And then also, to the extent that you have flexibility in your day, right? If you're not up against a deadline or a very rigid work schedule, think about what times you function best, right? Some people work really well in the late afternoon. I hear that from a lot of my clients. Is there a way that you can push some of your sort of most boring work or most taxing work to the time in your day when you work the best so that you're most likely to be successful? Um, and, and just try to think about that and notice that about yourself as well.
Yeah, everything you're saying, I'm like, check, check, check. Yeah, the partner who let me work on this other project also told me initially, like, I don't ever want to have a meeting before 11 a.m. And I'm like, cool, we will get along. Like,
Yeah.
because my sweet spot is basically like in the evening.
Right.
Um, so for me, I'm like, if you want me to come in at 7 in the morning or whatever, like which some partners do, I'm like, that is just not going to be happening.
Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that, and also the calendaring, and I totally agree on separating out the what you're going to do from actually doing it. And having some sort of process for doing that. Lee talks about a different boss who would do that every night. So when she came in the morning, like everything was ready to go and she
Right.
could just sit down and start working. These are not super complicated techniques, but I think they're incredibly effective.
Yeah. And once you implement them, and I always suggest like implement one thing at a time, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to be implementing setting aside time to plan every week or every night or however frequently you want to do it, like just do that for a couple weeks
Yeah.
and then change something else, right? Like just
Yeah.
do things when we have this tendency to want it to all be fixed all at once. So we're going to try all of these strategies. So that's a recipe for failure, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. Like try one, give it a few weeks, see how it's going, maybe add something else.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hear about body doubling. What is that?
Yeah. So body doubling is when you work with someone. Maybe you're in the same room. You're not working together, but you're just sitting in the same room or on the same Zoom, and you're both doing independent work. But the experience of someone else doing work in proximity to you can be very motivating for you to do work as well. And so finding a colleague who maybe you can sit in a coffee shop or sit in a conference room together and do work. There's also some virtual tools where you can actually book body doubling session.
Ooh.
So they will provide you a virtual body double. And I've heard that those can be really, really useful. Also there's a cancellation window. So the having a session booked for body doubling, that you're going to lose money or credit if you cancel can actually also be motivating. And that's the other component of body doubling. If you make a plan with someone to meet somewhere to do work together, you're going to be letting someone else down by not showing up. So also that sort of external pressure to get you to show up is really helpful as well. And, choose someone who's likely to show up themselves.
Yeah, no, a lot of our tutoring students say that that's one of the most useful aspects is just the accountability of like someone is
Right,
expecting me to do something and they're expecting me to be there. I mean, it's just like
right,
me. I know I'm going to the gym later today because I've already signed up for the class. If I don't go, I'm going to lose money. Like I'll
right,
be there
exactly.
at 5:30. Otherwise, I'd probably be like, I don't know if I feel like it today. Maybe not. Um, Cool. That sounds like a fun tool. Do you have any other like kind of tools or systems that people might want to consider for any of the things we talked about as potential challenges?
Yeah, I think that having also an email sorting system is really useful. So I what I use myself and what I recommend to other people is that when you see an email, there should be like as soon as you get it or as soon as you see it, there should be a task for it or an action for it. So it should either be deleted because you just don't need it, or like either deleted, read, and immediately deleted, right? Because it's something you don't need. It should be put into a folder for archive or something you may need to refer to later, or it should be responded to or flagged to immediately respond to. So my inbox, the only thing that's currently in my inbox are emails that need a response imminently.
Yeah.
Everything else is either archived because I may need it, it's a receipt that I'm going to have to pull up later, or it just is deleted. I sort of ruthlessly delete emails. And so coming up with a system, and then you can, if you're dealing with thousands of emails, I actually sometimes recommend that just to clear your inbox out, you just make a few folders like 2020, 2021, and like just get them out of your inbox into folders by year so that you can at least start going forward with a different system, because realistically no one is going to review 10,000 emails. Like they just have to go somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't necessarily recommend my personal strategy for people working in a law firm of just let them just flow in and have
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands of them that you never read. I mean, it's, one of the reasons I like being an entrepreneur is I can decide, that actually I'm just going to do all of my work in Slack and email is just like a stream of stuff that occasionally I need
right.
to dip into. But obviously, if you're, working in a legal context and you're getting emails from the court and co-counsel and opposing counsel, like you kind of need a better
You need
strategy.
it. Yeah. The other thing
uh,
I tell people, oh, sorry, go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay. The other thing I tell people is that we're we're living in this time where we're so into systems, like digital systems, right? And tech tools and all of these things. But um, paper works really well, like just like a notebook or a piece of printer paper next to you for especially something I hear a lot from clients is that they might be trying to do focused work on something and then another thought pops into their head, right? Like they're like, oh, I have to remember to do this other thing, or oh, I left the laundry in the washing machine, and that derails them from whatever they're working on. I think it's really useful to just keep like a piece of paper next to you to just jot that down. It gets it out of your brain so that you're not doing extra work to remember to take the laundry out of the washing machine, right? You've written it
Yeah.
down. It's somewhere that you can, when you're done with your workday, you're like, oh, these were those three things that popped up that I now have to do. Um,
Yep.
that doesn't need to be anything fancy. It could be a Post-it note. And so I recommend that to people as well.
Totally agree with you on that one. I am like the queen of random note cards where I'm just like jotting notes down and then
Yeah.
and I do look at them and honestly I've started keeping them even by my bed. So if I wake up in the middle
Yeah.
of the night or if I like the first thing in the morning when I'm kind of like waking up, I often get these, and some of those ideas are actually pretty good ideas that would just be gone if I hadn't written them down.
Right. Or we're doing so much mental energy to keep them in our brains. Like we're like, oh, I have to remember that it's distracting from the thing that we're actually doing in
Yeah.
the moment.
Oh, 100%. Do you have any thoughts around things like accommodations?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tricky, right? Because the reality of the legal profession is the reality of the legal profession, right? If you're a litigator and you have a court deadline, you can't really ask for an accommodation because of ADHD, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
not the reality. But there are definitely I think that needs that folks have that can be accommodated internally in a workplace, right? So maybe that is that you're going to be available, your work hours are going to shift, right? If you're not having to meet with people at specific times, maybe it is that on some days you're working from 2 to 9 p.m. instead of, 9 to 5. So that's something I think I really encourage, especially young attorneys, to really, if they can, regularly meet with their supervisor to sort of make sure that expectations are really clear, right? There's this tendency to not want to ask questions, right? You don't want to seem like you don't know what you're doing, but that also sometimes leads to not being clear about deadlines. So if someone is assigning you a project, really saying it would be really helpful if I knew exactly when you expect this by, and having those conversations and advocating for yourself so that you can do things in the best possible way. Um, uh, yeah, I think those are the big ones. I mean, a lot of workplaces these days are really in tune to these types of issues. And I've even seen some firms who bring in coaches or other professionals to do trainings with their attorneys. And so those are other things that you can do, right? Ask for professional development specific to ADHD or executive function challenges. Ask for training related to the firm's calendaring system, right? Every firm, maybe there are tools that the firm has or the workplace, the office has access to that you may not know about, but maybe a training could help you make better use of them, even through, employer sponsored health insurance. Like there are all sorts of things that if you just ask, you might have access to different services.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I mean, ultimately, the employer wants you to be successful, and you
Right.
may already have, an EAP that you can get some type of support through or something like that. Nobody wants you to be sitting there like freaking out and not getting your work done. So
Right.
I think, law firms are sort of notorious for giving these assignments and then not having a bunch of touch points or whatnot. But I think people can set that up for themselves. Say, hey, would it be okay? I think I should get you a draft of this, a week before the deadline. Would that work for you? And of course, nobody's going to be like, oh no, just don't do that.
Right. Right. And I also always say, like, you know, but senior attorneys like love to feel like they're being flattered, right?
Yeah.
So you can say, I really want to make this easier for you in the long run. Would it be useful for you if I sent you this on X date, right?
Yeah,
Like if you can frame
totally.
it that way, especially as a junior attorney, that would be that's really, really a really good way to do it. And it doesn't look like necessarily that you're just, trying to delay or
Right.
procrastinate or
Yeah,
whatever.
or like
Yeah.
being needy or whatever. It's like, and
Right.
frankly, they're probably not thinking about this that clearly anyway. So you're
Right.
like, yeah, of course, that sounds great. Thank you for taking the reins on that.
Exactly.
Um, well, before we wrap up, I do want to talk. You mentioned earlier, the creativity can be a plus for people whose brains are maybe a little neurocomplex. I like that terminology I've heard recently.
Yeah.
Um, how are there potential advantages, and are there sort of types of legal work or practice areas that might be a better fit? And how can people figure that out?
Yeah. I mean, I think that ADHD, I don't know. There's a lot of discourse that ADHD is a superpower. And I think that is true. It also sometimes has an effect of making people who have really struggle with ADHD to feel like their very real struggles are not being seen. So I don't love to use that phrasing, but I do think that there are advantages to ADHD, like I mentioned earlier, extreme creativity, right? People, you just have this ability to sort of think outside of a box, think of new solutions, creative solutions. And sometimes when we're working with clients who have ADHD, right, it can be really helpful for someone who recognizes and sees that and empathizes that. If you're trying to prep a client with ADHD for a deposition, and they are also, sort of scattered or not able to focus, right? It can be really helpful to connect on that level and to even employ some of the own tools that you do in helping to prep a client. There are all sorts of ways that it can be really useful. Hyper focus, like as I'm sure you know, can be really useful when
It's a
you
thing.
just have to hone in on drafting something or reviewing a contract. Like just having that laser vision can be incredibly helpful. Um, so I think that there are lots of advantages. I think that, the job market is really hard. So obviously, you can't always find exactly the perfect work environment for your brain. But I think, looking for offices that are going to have some flexibility. So maybe there's not flexibility in external deadlines, but there is flexibility in work hours, right? Allowing you to have sort of a non 9 to 5 schedule if that doesn't work for you. Like offices that really value the actual content and quality of your work and not that you're showing up at exactly at 9 a.m. I think that can be really great. More legal work that allows you to use your creativity, right? So, um, writing heavy workplaces can be really good for folks who feel like they sort of want to have the ability to express some creativity. I think that really what it comes down to is having supportive colleagues and supportive mentors who understand sort of that everyone's brain works a little differently. And I think that is probably something to value above the specific substantive type of legal work that you're doing, because ultimately, the people that you're spending all your time with are going to make a difference in how you're feeling about your work and how prepared you're going to be.
Yeah. No, I think that's all true. And even something as simple as like, do you have a secretary that you could use
Yes. Yeah.
potentially? Things
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I would never like have thought for 1 second that would make a difference. But when you have a really good secretary that you can lean on and be like, all right, I need you to do X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
and I need you to ping me if I'm not back, from this office where I'm writing a bunch of stuff in the next hour, because, you can basically like make that person, your kind of
Right.
helper, and like that's actually their job. So,
Right.
you
And
know.
like billing time too, right? Legal assistants can be incredibly helpful with keeping track of your time, putting it into a time billing system, right? Having those types of supports, or even offices that maybe not every attorney has a dedicated secretary or assistant, but maybe they have virtual tools that can be used for those purposes, or are at least willing to consider them, right? There's all sorts of
Yeah.
virtual assistants that can be helpful, and maybe the office is willing to invest in something like that.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine these days there are lots and lots of options.
Yeah.
All right, Emily, well, thanks so much for joining us. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts? What's maybe one thing that you want a young lawyer who's listening to this, who either knows they have ADHD or suspects they might, or has some executive function challenges, what should they know as they start their career?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the biggest thing is that, as I said earlier, um, everyone's brain works differently, and it's just a matter of figuring out what systems work best for you. And the only way that you can really do that is to try different things, right? So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to try a different calendaring method, or try a different, email management system, but also ask for help, right? I think that there are lots of more senior attorneys in this field who maybe they don't have diagnosed ADHD, but they struggle with all of the same things, and they
Yeah.
have figured out tools that work, and they may have some ideas. And I think that once people start sharing what their challenges are, they find that there are people who are really willing to help them and give them advice. So I really just encourage um, young attorneys or attorneys who are just starting out to find mentors, ask for help, figure out what resources are available.
I totally agree. Well, Emily, this has been fascinating. Remind us again how people can find out about you and reach out if they'd like to do that.
Yes, my website is emilyhaan.com, EMILYHAAN .com. And you can read more about me there, contact me there. And also, if you want to schedule a coaching intake or just have a 20-minute call with me, you can book it through that website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. This has been really fascinating. Thanks everyone for watching, and please subscribe so you don't miss anything. And you can check out lawschooltoolbox.com and reach out with any questions.